Alright everyone, just a really quick thing. For those of you who didn't see on Twitter, Gab, or Minds, I will be talking to V later on at 11 a.m. Eastern, so only, 2.5 hours from now. It's going to be, fairly early stream. I prefer to do streaming before noon. I know it's not everyone's bag, but as far as I'm concerned, it's easier. But we got to talk about Bob Corker, because a couple days ago he made some really funny comments. He was being asked about debt, about basically the shitty fiscal situation of our deficit within the country. And he's like, fucking who cares? Nobody cares about fiscal responsibility anymore. And I'm sitting there, Bob Corker's like an old neocon sort of dude. But he's absolutely right. Now, the caveat is, of course, Bob Corker, if you asked him how he would take care of that, how do you intend to balance the budget? I don't think that he could probably wrap his head around it. And the problem is that the entire world's economy is globalized and filled with shit at this point. American workers get screwed over and over. Usually the middle and working class get screwed the worst. Like, they get taken to Chocolate Town every fucking year. Trust me, I know. I had to file taxes, and it wasn't a pretty sight. Managed to get by. I'm just not complaining, but Uncle Sam certainly wants a lot of money for, bombing people, basically. You'll never find a politician who agrees on cutting everything and just across the board reducing the size of government. But it is true. You remember, well, maybe you remember at this point, it's been a while. 5-6 years ago, everyone's constantly raving about the debt. Oh, we're going to hit 10 trillion in debt. Oh, we're going to hit 15 trillion in debt. We're never going to climb our way out of it. Oh no, Obama must cut spending immediately and raise taxes, which he did. He didn't do the former. He increased spending in order to drive the debt up higher. Over and over again, every year, people had the conversation about which party is going to cut the deficit, which party is going to take care of the debt crisis. Meanwhile, it's not going to happen. It's just not. The only way to get out of it at this point is through very carefully lowering taxes to stimulate growth while at the same time drastic cuts to government. One thing they should go after is pensions. The government workers shouldn't get pensions. Now, if you're working in government, you should keep on the job and retire normally. You shouldn't get to retire 10 years early, get some sort of fucking pension, which half of these people do get to have. A politician, somebody's in the Senate. They serve for a couple of years and then resign. They get their Senate pension for the rest of their lives, limitlessly. A president's like Nixon gets his pension. Or did while he was still alive, despite the fact that he would have been removed from office. All he had to do was resign, and he got to keep that cushy, what was it, 200 grand a year, some crazy amount, for having, basically sold people out, for having broken the law. Less than any Clinton did, but, he got caught. He wasn't as good at hiding the fact that he was breaking the law. That's his problem. What's the difference between Richard Milhous Nixon and Hillary Clinton? The fact that Hillary Clinton didn't get caught. Bob Corker is absolutely right. The problem is that nobody really knows what to do about it. I mean, ask me what I would do about it. I would cut the size of government massively and lower the tax rate accordingly and try to run into the green. It could cause economic problems too. And therein lies your problem. We've gotten used to this weird situation in which we think that the government should be siphoning off a third of all productivity within the country. I think that's wrong anyway. I think it should be much smaller than that. I think that the government could make do with half the tax revenue it currently gets. If someone's working class, they shouldn't be paying a penny because they're barely making enough to get by on and live in a ragtag apartment or a shotgun row house or something. So why should they pay any taxes? The middle class, you get up towards the higher end of it, as I am, and all of a sudden your tax rate is certainly in the double digits. If you're self-employed, it's already over 25%. You have to have a shit ton of deductions. Now, Trump's lowered that a bit, which is, I'm very thankful for that. But it's a lot of money. When you're paying $16,000 to the federal government alone, it seems a little bit burdensome. Because trust me, you don't feel like you're particularly well off. And then you've got people who are like professionals. They're making, $250,000. The Democrats, like the neoliberals, they'll look at someone who's, on that margin of wealth, and it really is just the margins of wealth. They're a 1%er only in name. Somebody who's a doctor, they're a regular old lawyer, like a lawyer or something. They're making like, $200,000-300,000, maybe $1 million a year. They're barely doing better at this point than the upper middle class is, making $100,000 a year, honestly. They get blamed for all the problems by the neoliberals. They look at the poor and they say, look, those guys are taking all your money. Look at that greedy doctor, that greedy lawyer. Meanwhile, their friends are all banksters that are multinational and they're worth billions on and off paper. Most of their wealth, you don't even know that it exists. It's tied up in some overseas assets that you can't tax anyway. Therein lies the problem. There's why we have a debt problem. If you really want to unleash the engine of growth, you need to inject more capitalism back into the system too. Trump, by the way, he made the right decision by loosening banking restrictions, but only doing so for local and regional banks. And some people, very, very quickly, the liberals backed off of that one too. Yes, it looked like they were going to go into a royal fury, but then they realized that it didn't affect the really big banks that they actually constantly whine about, so they backed back off. That was the right decision. I think he made the perfect decision on that one. Deregulating big banks, as we've seen, is not necessarily the greatest idea. Sometimes it could be problematic. Keeping smaller and regional banks regulated, though, what we should be doing is applying less regulation and taxation at the lower rungs. People who have less money and smaller and regional businesses need to get a boost in order to compete with the juggernauts, with the monopolistic companies. In that way, it speeds up, I think, the capitalistic cycle, and there's replacement and evolution that goes on at a faster rate. I think that's one answer to it. But even that's not going to take care of our debt on its own. It'll help to reduce the deficit. It's not going to eliminate it. And Bob Corker sits there saying that nobody cares about fiscal responsibility. When's the last time that he brought up the debt? Congress doesn't even talk about it anymore. During the election, it was very, very briefly mentioned, we are still in all this debt and Donald wants to cut taxes, basically. Or, we're in all this debt and Clinton wants to increase spending. But it was only mentioned sporadically. Nobody cared about it. It's not a big issue. It used to be the issue of our time. 5 years ago, everyone was panicking, thinking the economy would magically sink into a depression because of debt, and we'd be owned by China, basically. Now, of course, China has its own debt problems, their own slowdown and demographic crisis. They're arguably going to have worse problems than us over the next 10 years. Is a reason why I'm hedging my bets with the Americas, generally, economically speaking. Or with India. India, I think, will do better than China. They're going to supplant China for number 3 at some point, I think. Behind, of course, the US and EU. I look at this situation and I find it very funny because it used to be something people panicked about. Now it's something like, we just hit, however much. Do you even know how much debt we're in? I don't know. I haven't checked the debt clock in a good long number of months. I should probably check that. It's got to be up, what is it, 20 trillion or something by now? Yeah, good luck paying that off. If your household ran that kind of budget, where increasingly larger and larger proportions of everything you made just had to go towards keeping your debt payments solvent. It's like student loans. Like, I have tens of thousands of dollars in student loans. Now, I pay more than I actually have to each month because I'm able to do so, because I want to pay it down as quickly as possible, because I want the total of the income that I make that has to go towards that potentially to be less and less and less very quickly. I know that as I get older, as I may become incapacitated, maybe I have a heart attack or something, I'm not able to edit or make YouTube videos for 2 months. What's that going to do to my income? I don't want to have a bunch of outstanding debt that I have to make monthly payments on. I want to keep that as slim as possible. I think that that's a prudent thing to do. As for investing in anything government can touch, no, it's never going to happen. I'd rather buy silver or something. Not to become like a precious metals, hoarder or something like that. But yeah, having a little bit of that on hand is a good idea. I've got a little drawer of silver, yeah, just in case. Now, of course, if a shit hits the fan situation, a gun is more valuable by far, because you need that in order to guard the silver. But Bob Corker, he's probably hoarding precious metals right now, too. He's like, basically, fuck it. He looks like a defeated man. The look on his face when he's talking about this is like, yeah, I wish that people took it seriously, but they don't. The Democrats want to raise spending and taxation, and the Republicans cut taxes, and Trump's the only one even trying to deregulate things, and it's a slow, difficult executive process by far. Trump is making headway, but it would take, at the rate that he's going, it'd take him 1,000 years to get rid of all the burdensome regulation. So he can only impact so much. It's helpful, but it's not enough. Helpful is another round of tax cuts coupled with slashing the size of the federal government by a good 50% would be really helpful. But even that I don't think would take care of the problem. There have been times we've run a surplus before. It is something we're capable as a nation of doing. It's just that there's a lot required that has to go into it in order to get that out. That's about all. Peace out.